Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show, where you'll find health and fitness inspiration, motivation, and information shared in 15-minute episodes. Tune in while getting a move on to make leading and enjoying the benefits of a healthy lifestyle almost too easy. It's the Fit 15. And now your host, Catherine Basu.
Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show. I'm your host, Catherine Basu, and today I'm joined by Dr. Nicole Avena again. She was on the podcast yesterday and several episodes ago, episode 40, where we talked about what to eat when you're pregnant, and she shared some tips based on her book of the same name. And now for today's episode, Dr. Avena is going to be sharing her answers to the questions that those of you sent in on what to feed your baby and toddler. So, as I mentioned yesterday, I'm so grateful for Dr. Avena for taking extra time for answering my questions and then for answering your questions today. And if that wasn't amazing enough, because we're going to go over 15 minutes again today for the show, but she's also giving away a copy of her books, What to Eat When You're Pregnant and What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler. So do not miss the show notes in addition to yesterday's episode and today's episode and What to Eat When You're Pregnant if you did not catch that one, so that you can have a chance to win the book. Her new book, What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler, the one we're talking about again today, is available for pre-release now and will be out next week. So if you have a mom-to-be or mom in your life who is struggling to figure out what to feed herself or her little ones, these books are an awesome option. So I hope you'll go check them out. I'm going to shorten Dr. Avena's bio for you today just so we can get into her answers to your questions, but she has a lot of expertise. She's super impressive as a scientist, so wanted to at least share a little bit of her credentials here. Dr. Nicole Avena is a research psychologist and neuroscientist who is an expert in the fields of nutrition, diet, and addiction. She received a Ph.D. in Psychology and Neuroscience from Princeton University in 2006, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at Rockefeller University. She has published over 90 scholarly journal articles on topics related to diet, nutrition, and overeating. Dr. Nicole Avena has appeared on several television news programs as well as daytime TV shows, including The Doctors and The Dr. Oz Show. Her work has been featured in many popular print forums, including Shape, Women's Health, New York Times, Bloomberg, Businessweek, and Men's Health. So you guys can see how and why I'm so grateful that she has taken the time to be on our show for 3 episodes now. Dr. Avena, welcome back to the show, and let's dive into these questions. Question number 1, this one came up a lot, is how long should kids eat pureed food for? Just had a few similar questions about pureed food. So how long should they be eating it for? Is it okay for a 1-year-old to eat kind of those pureed food pouches if they'll actually eat real food is another similar question.
Yeah, so the puree question really comes down to when you think baby's ready to move on. And it's going to be so individually different depending on the baby. I say, proceed with caution because you don't want to, have the baby choke or have the baby gag. I mean, that's the scariest thing you'll ever experience in your life. And so really it's, taking your time and just you decide like, when do you think baby's ready for thicker textures? And there's different levels of purees. You can have an extremely thin puree. Like when you first start feeding the baby, I suggest you start off with something that's almost the consistency of the breast milk or water. It's really, actually, one of the things I suggest in the book is when you first start feeding the baby, feed them breast milk or feed them baby formula on a spoon, just so that they get accustomed to, having a spoon put in their mouth and it's not this foreign taste. Because if you start off with a spoonful of, peas, it's just like a strange thing to have a spoon shoved in your mouth for the first time and then also have this other taste on it. So it can be helpful to have it be something that they're familiar with and that they like. Mm-hmm. But then from there, I think it becomes, increasing the consistency of the puree and making it a little bit thicker here and there. At some point, the baby having small, very soft chunks in it. You just have to keep in mind that the teeth that baby have aren't really for chewing. So baby might have a couple front teeth at some point, but they're just there for cuteness. They're not there to like serve any purpose in terms of food chewing.
Sure.
So you have to, remember the baby needs to be able to mash the food with their tongue and the roof of their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how they chew. So I tell people, if you're not sure, stick some in your own mouth and see if you could mash it in the roof of your mouth with your tongue and how that feels. And that's a good kind of way to get a sense of, whether or not baby could be ready.
Yep.
And so, typically my experience is babies, are on purees to some extent up to age 1, and then maybe start off with, around that age, give or take a month or two, depending on the baby, they, move on to bigger bites and maybe with some, soft finger foods. But I don't think that purees have to end at any point. I have a 9-year-old who still has baby purees. Only because, it's actually easier to transport. I mean, when she goes to school, I can take a pouch of, pureed whatever, and, she could take it and have it at lunch, and then she's got a serving of a vegetable or a serving of a fruit. And I don't have to worry about, cutting it up in small bits or her, finding a knife to cut it herself. I mean, it just kind of takes out a lot of the hassle that, you could have if you're in 4th grade and you only have, 20 minutes to eat, your vegetables or your fruit.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that, there's certainly no reason to stop purees. I think one thing, you want to be mindful of is if you have a little one, you do want them to at some point, be picking up their own food and feeding themselves. And so a lot of times, if baby becomes dependent on the puree pouches, that's not always such a good thing. We do want them to at some point, move away from, pureed peas and little pieces of carrot, and maybe have them eating their own little steamed pieces of carrots or steamed, peas, so that they can learn that, reflex to kind of pick stuff up and put it in their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, most of the time, babies are keen on doing that anyway, because they want to, practice, and they enjoy playing with the food and stuff like that. So that would be my only caveat would be, it's not something that I think you need to ever take away, but I think you want to just make sure that it's not becoming like the sole source of, babies' fruits and vegetables as a form of a puree.
Got it. All right, friends, if you are joining us and only have 15 minutes right now, that is your halfway point reminder. You want to turn around if you're going for that out and back walk. All right, back to Dr. Avena. And then for juice, are juices bad even if they're 100% natural and have no additives? What do you think about juices?
I don't like juices. In my opinion, there's no place for juice. Mm-hmm. The reason is, and even the American Pediatric Association has come out and said this, that, they don't suggest that babies under the age of 1 have juice. Mm-hmm. I don't think just anybody has juice, because to be quite honest, it's really, just the sugar that's in the fruit. And so when you juice something, you're taking out a lot of the nutrients and a lot of the fiber, all the fiber essentially. Yeah. And you're really just taking out the sugar and drinking the sugar. Right. And so I think that a better option is to just have a puree. And so, that way you get the fiber, you get all the other nutrients, but you're still, able to have the good taste. And then, people talk about, giving little kids juice to help with like constipation and stuff like that. The truth of the matter is that the juice constipation idea, the reason why the babies would maybe not be constipated anymore if you gave them prune juice, let's say, it really has nothing to do with the health of the prune juice. It's actually the fact that the sugar in the prune juice is what's going to help them not be constipated.
Okay, yep.
So you really want to, if baby's constipated, you want to give them fiber and water. And so, giving them water is going to be, I think a better way, and it's going to allow them not to have that, sugar rush of the juice that's coming from a prune. Right.
No, that makes sense. Another question, how much carbs are okay? I'm assuming that maybe that means processed foods, right? But how much is okay? Is it okay?
Oh yeah. Like in terms of, maybe the question was thinking, because people often will ask about how much bread and pasta and those kinds of carbs.
Right.
Those are good to have. I mean, babies, need their fair share of carbohydrates, and, it just has to try to make it come from, healthier sources. And so, little bits of pasta are good for toddlers because they like, sort of picking stuff up and putting it in their mouth. That can be, a healthy carbohydrate. And, you can also experiment. There's so many different types of pastas available now. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, the traditional type of, wheat pasta. I actually just the other night tried chickpea pasta, which was delicious. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's so many varieties now where, you can actually get a little bit of vegetables or some other types of things that are healthy injected into your pasta as well. Mm-hmm. And so those are good options to try. I mean, certainly little bits of bread are fine for the baby to try. But like with anything else, I think balance is important. You don't want to make sure that they have, the majority of their calories coming from carbohydrates. You want to make sure that they're also getting exposed to fruits, vegetables, and also to protein. Sure. A lot of times the more friendly foods for babies tend to be carbs, right? They tend to be, pasta, rice, cereal, like Cheerios, and these, very carbohydrate rich foods. And that's fine. And I think it's good, but I also think it's important to make sure that there's an effort put into, trying to get baby to try some of these other foods as well, or incorporating, little bits of, ground beef or ground lamb. They can be served, alongside with the pasta for your toddler or something like that. So just getting more protein in the meal as well is a good thing to do.
Yeah, I actually had a few people ask about like their toddlers struggling to get them to eat meat and increase their iron. So they're asking if they had any proteins or foods that, you might recommend. One toddler only likes to eat meat if it's cooked pepperoni off of a pizza. So any other option?
Oh, well, so, I mean, I think, trying different things, a lot of times, especially the toddlers that are like closer to 2, mm-hmm. They want to just do what everyone else is doing. So they don't want a crumbled up piece of hamburger. They want their own hamburger, or they want to make their own hamburger. So I think that, if you can come up with some ways to kind of make them feel like they're eating something that is, cool, and like what the big kids are eating, what mom and dad are eating, that can actually really help. Mm-hmm. I know with my toddler, if we're having, hamburgers, or we're having like, lamb burgers, like we, sometimes we'll make ground lamb burgers. Mm-hmm. It just has like a different taste. We'll give her like the crumbles, but then we'll let her kind of make it into a little sandwich, and she gets like a little slider bun, and then she puts the crumbles into the slider bun. And so, it just is another way to kind of get her interested in eating, and she's very keen on eating it that way. Whereas if I were to take a slider off of my plate and say, oh, I'm going to cut this up for you, then she would have nothing to do with it.
Right.
So I think if you can come up with ways to kind of make it more fun and make them, feel like they're doing something cool, then that can actually, make a world of difference. But I also think, there's a role for beans too. I mean, if your baby's not so keen on eating meat, then, it might be good to try like kidney beans, for instance. Like if you cook those well, they can be nice and mushy, and those are a good toddler food because they can pick them up and pop them in their mouth. And then, trying, like I said, in addition to ground beef, trying things like ground turkey or ground lamb, that can also be other options to try too. It doesn't always have to be, typical, beef that we use as the source for babies.
Sure. I had a few questions about milk too. So one was, is normal milk or Fairlife or other brands preferred for toddlers? And, so someone had her daughter drinks regular milk, but she can't handle things with lactose very well. So just kind of curious if there's any preferences for the toddlers or anything you have mentioned for the milk.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of milk, yeah. So after babies turns 1, it's suggested that they're, typically they wean off of breast milk, or if they're on formula, they typically wean off of formula and then start to move on to, consuming cow's milk. That's typically what people do. But, that's not always necessary, in the sense that you don't necessarily, have to completely 100% replace, the amount of formula they were consuming or the amount of breast milk they're consuming now with cow's milk. The idea is that they need the cow's milk so that they can get calcium. Also, cow's milk is fortified with lots of things. And so, for instance, vitamin D is often, put into cow's milk, and vitamin D is something that we all need, but many of us are deficient in.
Sure.
And so, part of the reason why we sort of push milk on our toddlers is not necessarily because they need cow's milk, it's that they need the nutrients that are typically in cow's milk. But now, there's so many different milk options out there. I mean, almond milk, lots of other, sort of milks that are available. You could certainly try with your toddler as long as you don't have any concerns about allergies. I mean, there's no reason why, you could try almond milk or, some of these other nut milks that are out there. I would just suggest that you try to get the low sugar options because, sometimes different versions of some of these milks tend to have a lot of added sugar. So you just want to make sure that you get the sort of no sugar added or the unsweetened versions. And then also just make sure that, baby is getting enough of the vitamin D, and they're also getting enough of the calcium from other sources. And so if they're eating a well-balanced diet where you feel like, they're getting enough calcium from cheese or from yogurt, or maybe they have vitamin D, fortified in something else that they're consuming, then, you don't have to necessarily focus solely on, the cow's milk. In terms of, the percentage of fat, it really, again, I opt for the whole milk because, it does have the full amount of fat. And at that point, babies can use it. It's not something that, it's going to make them fat or, they're using that fat for brain development. It's not about, their body or image at that point. It's, so much of brain development is still occurring in that 1 to 2 year range. So, the fat that's in the milk is good for them. It's good for their brains. So I don't necessarily think that, there's need to sort of skimp out on the fat. But again, I think, the problem comes up when, and this happens when babies become like little milk addicts where they don't want to eat and they just want to drink milk all day. And so, it is important, I think, to sort of be mindful of how much they're consuming and to just make sure that they're not consuming more than what, the pediatrician is recommending. One tip I have that I use actually with both of my daughters is that I would thin out the milk with water. I would at some points it was like half water, half milk, only because, they wanted something to drink and they preferred milk. And that was a way to, get them the benefits of the milk, but also stretch it out so that I didn't end up having to, give them more than what they actually needed throughout the day.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And also just one other note about that, giving another option to drink. I mean, water is a good thing for them to be drinking at that age as well. And so after they're 1, I mean, there's no reason why they, their sole source of fluid shouldn't be milk. The majority of it should actually be from water too. They should be drinking water. So I think it's a good idea to try to mix it up and make sure that they don't become dependent on milk in the sense that they think it's the only thing that they're supposed to drink. They can drink water too.
Sure. And is there a certain time when you would switch from whole milk to a different percentage or kind of talk to your pediatrician?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to. I mean, some pediatricians recommend it, at some point you should switch to 2%. And then when the kids get a little bit older, you go down to skim milk. I think it's really a matter of preference, to be honest. I mean, it's what your family is drinking. I know my husband will not drink skim milk. He likes, that Fairlife 2% milk. And so that's what my kids drink when they want to drink milk. So, I mean, it really boils down to like, what does your family drink? I don't really think there's anything that's, specific to, what the baby needs. It's really, what do you guys prefer and what do you want the baby to drink? And that's, I think, the best choice.
Awesome. Had some random questions for you. I don't know if you can answer these. Her daughter loves raw onions. Any idea why that might be?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. I have not heard of that. Well, I would say encourage it.
Right. Yeah, the vegetable.
Yeah, it's a vegetable and, it's not something that, most little kids love. So I would say, hey, take advantage of that. And, that's good because it kind of shows that maybe she's got, a sophisticated palate and she'll, like all kinds of different tastes when she gets older.
Right. Another one that's a little fun one. And so her daughter insists on eating foods separately and foods can't touch each other. So sandwiches and pizza are just out of the question. Any reasoning behind that or something she can do to change that up?
Yeah, that I think is somewhat of like a universal little kid mentality that, the foods can't touch each other. That's why there's like all those plates that are divided into 3 or 4 sections so that, you can separate the food so they don't touch each other. I don't, hey, I look at it like you have to pick your battles. That if your kid doesn't want their foods to touch, then okay, fine. As long as you eat them all, let them touch each other when they're in your stomach.
Right.
So I would say, at some point you kind of have to just let that go. If that's their preference, that might just be their preference, and they're most likely going to grow out of it, and it won't be such an issue when they get older. But one thing, I think it does come a little bit with age where, once they get to the point where, one thing I noticed is when they start to kind of put their own foods together, like if you let them make their own little sandwich. So if you give them like little cut up strips of bread and maybe, my younger daughter really likes tuna fish. And so you can kind of like give them the ingredients and say, here you go, like assemble your own little sandwich. That can be fun for them. And that's a way to kind of get them to say, hey, and I can actually have foods touch and it's not going to be the end of the world. So having it be their idea really can help. And so that might be one thing to try, or even with like, if you want to do like taco night at home and you maybe give baby or your child like a soft, wedge of a tortilla and say, okay, you could make yourself a little taco and you pour the ground beef in and you sprinkle a little bit of cheese on it. That can be a fun way for them to kind of feel like they're making something, and then it can actually, be more like what you want them to kind of get accustomed to eating, where you put different flavors together.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Someone's asking kind of what foods to include next for a 20-month-old that she might not refuse. So loves cheese, apples, bananas, strawberries, toast, hamburger buns only, not the hamburger meat.
Yeah.
Crackers, yogurt, anything like that might be good at that age to try to introduce.
Yeah. At that age, you're really starting to get to the point where you can pretty much go for anything. And it really comes down to just making sure that it's, cooked well enough or cut in small enough pieces where, it's not going to pose a choking hazard.
Sure.
But really, I think the best thing is to take your baby food shopping and let them pick out some stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, when they walk up and down those aisles, they might see something that, strikes their fancy, and then, try it. It might be something that you've never even tried before. But I think if you feel like you're in a rut and there's not a lot of options left, and you feel like maybe baby's not getting a lot of variety, definitely think about taking them to the store and, kind of picking some new stuff that no one's ever tried. Let's, try some, new experiences. Also in my book, in the What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler book, I have a lot of different food ideas at the different, time points. And so the book is structured to be month by month. And so it's that sort of builds upon, what baby's ready to handle at a typical month and what kinds of, foods are important in terms of the nutritional value at a given month for baby's development. And so definitely check out the book because, there's lots of recipes and lots of food ideas for, each of the different months. And again, I did this on purpose because I found that there was really a need for this and a need for kind of ideas on what to feed your baby.
Yeah.
Because, you kind of, after you go through like the typical standard list of things to try, you kind of run out of ideas. And so really the goal of the book was to give, parents, some good ideas on different things you can try. So that, in addition to the ideas maybe you could get from your daughter, taking her on a little bit of a food shopping spree could, change things.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And then I don't know if you have a number one food that you should convince your toddler that it's a food worth eating.
Well, I think my number one food would be broccoli, only because it's extremely cruciferous and it's bitter, right? So babies are naturally not going to like it. But if you can get them to, try it and taste it from an early age, it's going to have, this impact where I think that they're going to be more willing to then try things that don't necessarily quite, taste like we expect them to taste, or might have a little bit of a bitter taste, but then eventually, you feel like you taste the value in whatever you're eating. So I definitely think broccoli is a good thing. That's a little bit tough to do with the little ones because broccoli doesn't puree all that well.
Right.
So, but definitely for the older ones, you can use, the steamed little stalks of broccoli that look like little trees, and, kids like that. They can, if you cut them up small, they can pick them up with their hands. And I think that to me is sort of my like goal food to try to, get kids to like, because like I said, that's really sort of the most bitter of the vegetables for little ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get them to like that, then I feel like there's hope for getting them to like anything.
I love that. I like the analogy of trees. I feel like that would go over well with my niece anyway.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate you coming on the podcast to share some insights, and I'm excited about the book. I think when we release the episode, it will be out, even though when we're talking now, I have to wait to get my hands on a copy. But what's the best way for people to stay in touch, to follow you, to learn more about the book, and then where you'll be on your book tour when you get to that point?
Yeah, definitely. So if you go to my website, www.drnicoleavena.com, there's links to the book. There's links to, all the research articles that we're, working on, lots of different articles about things that are related to feeding baby, things related to just nutrition in general. And then there's also links to, places that where I'll be talking about this over the next couple of months. And so definitely check out the website, and that's really the place to go to get all the latest information.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And I'm excited. And we were chatting together about maybe doing a giveaway, so people should be staying tuned for that. They might be lucky, right?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, it's Catherine. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, and the answers to my fan questions, whether you sent them in yourself or not. I know I had a lot of repeated questions asked, so I hope that they're ones that apply to you and your family as well. If you are looking for more help on what to feed your baby and toddler, you can definitely listen to yesterday's episode if you missed it, which is a more general episode, or you can pre-order a copy of Dr. Nicole Avena's book, which will be out next week, May 8th, 2018. Or if you want to see how lucky you are, you can enter our giveaway and enjoy a copy of that and a copy of What to Eat When You're Pregnant, which is a book I've been loving and my clients have been loving ever since it was published a few years back. So hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you subscribe to the podcast, I will chat with you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fit 15. For show notes and more, visit fitarmadillo.com/podcast. See you next time.
Yes, to enter the giveaway, you want to go to fitarmadillo.com/podcast and find today's episode for what to do. And the book, What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler, will be available in time for Mother's Day. So pre-order it, even if you are entering the giveaway contest. I know you're going to love it so much that you'll want to give it as a gift to a mom of a toddler and or baby. Mother's Day this year, 2018, is Sunday, May 13th. All right, I'm really going to leave now until tomorrow. Chat with you then. Bye.